Yeah, don't. Some of us are more expert in battery stuff. Yeah. Gosh. No.
Good afternoon. Welcome to today's Cracker Barrel. I'm Susan Kipke with the Governmental Affairs Committee of the Mitchell Area Chamber of Commerce and will serve as moderator. These sessions are intended to provide information to the public. Any opinions expressed here today are not that of the Mitchell Area Chamber of Commerce. Today we will hear from our District 20 state legislators, Representative Lance Coase, Representative Paul Muskimmons, and Senator Josh Klum. Before we start, we would like to thank the City of Mitchell for the use of their facilities and enabling us to broadcast live over their YouTube channel. We are also broadcasting via Facebook Live on the Mitchell Chamber of Commerce account. This session is scheduled for 1 hour, so I'll start by describing the format. Each legislator will have 2 minutes to give a brief overview of the session or to talk about a particular item they see of interest. We will then move to questions from the audience. Audience, please keep your questions brief and to the point. We only have an hour and want to get to as many questions as possible. When asking a question, please go to that front table microphone, state your name, speak clearly into the microphone, ask your question. Legislators will be given ample time to answer each question, but please be mindful of the other legislators. They are just going to answer as they see fit. That we're not going to alternate because some of them have more experience with subjects than others. We will end with closing comments from each legislator, which will be 2 minutes. We ask that you be respectful of one another and that audience members limit side conversations. Please turn off or mute your cell phones. Okay, let's get started. We'll start with Senator Klum.
Thank you. Thanks again to the Chamber for hosting these again this year, and thanks for everyone for coming. As you probably are aware, in session this year, the conversation is primarily revolving around dollars and mainly the lack thereof. So as we go through the session, really that's how I've been going through things this year. We talk about an issue over here, but it always usually goes back to the overall budget. A lot of my time this year has been spent looking for really just a few dollars to give to the CASA program that we run around the state. So it's kind of, I've been putting a lot of effort into that, but primarily that. And we have had, again, the hemp bill is up again this year, but that's really not a top subject matter like it was last year. It had its first hearing in House Ag yesterday, and it's still in the process of being worked. It's a very open and fluid discussion, so that's where we are with that. Other than that, it's just answering emails, and we really only had our first real debate on the floor yesterday because it's just the way this process gets started. Bills have to get to committee and stuff like that. So with that, my session is off to a good start, but nothing major has really happened so far.
Thank you, and I also thank the Chamber and for organizing this, and the city for allowing us to use their facility. As you all know, this is my second year, and my time basically is spent almost entirely in appropriations. So when it comes to a lot of the public issues, the committees that deal with those, I don't hear much about that until it might hit the floor, and that's just now starting. But what I would like to do is just kind of, I always say, if we fly at about 30,000 feet as it relates to the state of South Dakota, number one, we will again balance the budget. That'll be done by March 36th day of the legislature. So we have 36 days to do that. So how do we do that? In appropriations, we've heard budget testimony from 18 departments. They've expressed what their needs are. We have 19 to go. And once we have that all done, we will put it on a spreadsheet and say, these are the needs, this is where the money needs to go. And I want to just mention another thing. Not only will the state of South Dakota balance their budget, but they also will maintain a reserve. And why is that important? We're a AAA rated state. And that does help any other entities within the state that might want to borrow money if they submit to the tax revenue being the source of repayment. The interest rates are good. Approximately this year already, there's about $7.7 million, if I remember, saved in financing costs by refinancing to a lesser rate because of the AAA rating. So that's important. That's important to our state, to the executive branch, and to the legislators. As Senator Klum said, a lot of the things right now comes down to money. Folks, there's not enough to go around. And even though we expect about $48 million more in revenue than last year, however, we're going to lose $20 to $23 million come July because of the federal law that says that we can no longer collect sales tax on internet services. For the state, that's going to represent between $20 and $23 million. We've got to replace that. Secondly, there's a lot of talk about no raises. The executive branch, the governor said, we just don't have the money to give raises. We look at the big three being community service providers, education, and state employees. We've got issues in all of that, in those areas. Just to put it in perspective, if we were to do a 2%, which really is the consumer price index right now, if we were to do a 2% increase in wages for those three, that amounts to about $34 million. Okay, we're up $48 million, we think. You subtract $23 million off of that and add another $34 million, basically says somebody isn't going to get what they need. Already the budgets are real lean. So we're looking, as appropriators, we're looking to say, what might we be able to cut in order to bridge that gap? We're diligently working on that. Don't know where that may be. That's the process. And again, we will balance the budget. That will happen. But I can almost guarantee you, not everybody's going to get what they need or what they want. Thank you.
I also want to thank the Chamber for holding this event, and everyone that chose to attend today, welcome and thanks for coming. Lastly, I'd like to thank the voters of District 20 for giving me this opportunity to serve. I will say that I serve on a policy committee. We get updated daily from appropriations on what they dealt with that day, but those are the biggest concerns we'll be dealing with in here is the budget issues, low cost, low service state, and puts a lot of challenges on us without raising taxes to serve the needs of the people of South Dakota. In policy, I'm fortunate enough to serve on Commerce and Energy and Health and Human Services committees. We've been hearing some of the talk that are bringing forth some of the biggest issues so far that are publicly acknowledged: transgender bills, smoking issues, moving the age to 21, the lost revenue, the states' rights issues that are challenged by the keeping up with federal restrictions. And so that's why those split votes came about on the smoking issue. So it's a privilege to serve, and it's a privilege to serve with these two gentlemen because of the diversity of the committees that we serve on. We hope to serve District 20 effectively by being in different areas in here.
Thank you. We will now take questions from the audience. If nobody has one, I have something. I'd like to direct your, you want to go first?
No, you go first. Lady first.
I'd like to direct your attention to House Bill 1177, particularly page 3, and I'm going to give you a handout. House Bill 1177 is actually 7 pages long. I'm only concerned with page 3. The bill deals with school boards and the term and such. I'm not concerned about that. What I am concerned about is some of the language on page 3 concerning the election. Currently, SDCL 13-7-10.7 allows joint school board and municipal elections. SDCL 13-7-10.3 allows joint school board and primary elections. This language has been stricken from the language in the bill. It allows for an election to take place the first Monday in November, which correlates with the general election. My other concerns are time commitment for county auditors. Will the county be handling absentee ballots for the voters who want to vote in person or by mail? If so, auditors would need to give each voter 2 separate ballots, mail 2 separate ballots, which means hiring more staff, more supplies, etc. If they are completely separate elections, voters will have to go to the school to cast either their absentee or election day ballot, and to the courthouse or their designated polling place to cast their general election ballot. If they request mailed ballots, they will be receiving 2 ballots mailed separately to them. Increased costs for county auditors, school districts, and taxpayers. More ballot styles, more postage, more staff. Increased costs for school districts. Most school districts can create and print their own hand-counted paper ballots at a minimum cost. If they are mandated to combine with the general election, they will be mandated to use optical scan ballots, which are more expensive. These are my concerns. I don't mind that the election would take place on the same day as the general election, but I think that school districts should have the choice. And as I said, expenses are going to be much more. Either and counties and school districts will have to hire more staff. So I just want you to be aware of that, and if you have any comments, fine. If you don't. I don't. I'm sorry.
Would you be fine if we struck that portion of the bill?
Yeah, like the rest of the bill doesn't really concern me. It's regarding school boards, and they would have to answer for the rest of the bill. I know it changes 3-year terms to 4-year terms. They would be elected every other year. It would take effect 2024, and there are provisions for the different members to be elected prior to that. But that I'm not part of the school board. That's not my thing. That would be up to the schools and the school boards to talk about that. My concern is the election and the voters and the taxpayer dollars. That's my concern.
I just, thank you. You always do a great job of informing me of the issues. Thank you for that. It's my understanding, and again, this has not been in committee yet, and it's certainly not hit the House floor, but it's my understanding I don't remember who it was, if it was a lobbyist or a fellow legislator, that kind of the intent was to try to increase voter participation in school board elections, which in some areas, and I can't speak for the Mitchell School District, if we have good turnout or not, but the concern is that oftentimes there just is not enough participation from the voters, thinking that if it was to be combined, more people would come out and select I don't want to say do a better job of selecting, but the more voters you have, the more apt you're going to get to select good people. Does that make sense? I think that's kind of the intent. Now, there's always unintended consequences, which you've brought up, and I thank you for that.
Okay.
Commissioner Claggett.
Yes. John Claggett with Davidson County Commission. Josh, I wanted to piggyback on your first comment in terms of CASA. We've been, assisting that for years and years, and we've been asked several times to extend CASA and make their dimensions bigger, so to speak. And at one of the points when we had that conversation, the tribes really weren't involved that much. And I wanted to ask you, and maybe Paul, you've run into it on the human services side. We didn't seem like there was much participation. I just didn't know if there's been a conversation about that.
Participation on behalf of the other counties?
Yes. Yeah.
I can't speak to the counties involved, but I know that the First Circuit here is doing a lot.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so their territory is expanding.
And it's to the overload side, and so that was a real concern that I didn't know if the dialogue was with the tribe specifically.
I can't speak to
so
that. I don't know.
That'd be one suggestion from our side.
What all I've been trying to do is, right now, Costa gets a portion of speeding tickets.
Yes.
You get a speeding ticket, you get a fine, then there's a fee and court costs attached to it. They get a portion of, I think, $2 of that right now.
Yeah.
I've been trying to see if we can increase that some. I'm
Yep.
running into some roadblocks with that effort.
Yep.
So, but that's what we're working on.
Good.
It really only comes down to like, I think, $30,000 a year.
Mhm.
What that means for this First Circuit cost is all that really comes down to.
Yeah.
But I think, how many counties do we cover now? 9. We
Yes.
cover 9 counties. They have 0 kids on their waiting list. They are doing an incredible job
Yes.
reaching and helping those kids who need help the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get them the resources they need, just like that's all we're doing. I'm
Yes.
just trying to get everyone the resources they need.
Well, our heart is with them, and they've done wonderful work, so I'm just hoping we can reach out to those that can be a participant. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, my name is Sean Rummel. My question, so I looked up some statistics, and South Dakota has the 7th highest suicide rate, 3rd highest adolescent suicide rate, and transgender people have the highest risk of suicide that's known. So my question is, what message do you think it sends to our youth year after year, bill after bill, when legislature keeps bringing up these transgender bills and it comes up all the time? Don't you think we should be protecting these people rather than trying to go after these people? I guess that's the question.
Well, I'll speak to that. One of the governor's focuses is on suicide prevention, and one of the reasons, there are a lot of issues with suicide in South Dakota. The data we got in Health and Human Services is that we rate 6th in the country for suicides, not 7th, but it's in that range, and that's increased 40% over the last 10 years. So she set the Human Services and ESS on a program to intervene and to try to have more effective prevention, intervention, and postvention for suicide in South Dakota. One issue there is that we're an outlier compared to other states. Most states, older individuals are the primary source of suicides. In South Dakota, our main group is from 20 to 29-year-old males. And so we are an outlier compared to the rest of the country with those who are attempting suicide. Now, we don't control, none of us has brought a bill on transgender, but I want you to know that I don't believe that the intent of anyone in the legislature, including those who present bills, is to be anti-transgender. The bill that we've dealt with this year created a lot of angst, a lot of discussion. Our committee hearings are 2 hours. It ran 2 hours and 40 minutes before a vote was taken in House State Affairs. So leadership took that rather than hand it to Health and Human Services, which I serve on. We had nearly 2 hours of discussion before we took the vote on the House floor. And my perspective is that there wasn't a hater in the room. This was not meant to be negative for transgender individuals or their families. We respect the circumstances and the anxiety and the risk of suicide and the challenges that they face in school and their daily lives. And what this did was not a Republican or a Democratic issue. This was not a spending versus non-spending. This was placing personal values that we all hold against one another. And depending on which one you place the highest priority on, probably determined where you landed and how you voted. After 4.5 hours of testimony and discussion, I think that very few votes were changed in the entire House of Representatives because of personal values. And it placed doctor-patient, confidentiality, and parental rights versus child protection in this state. And I think for a number of us that voted in favor of that bill, child protection for us took precedence. And that was the reason we voted as we did. But none of the opponents or people that voted no had any more or less concern for children or for the future of transgender. This was not an attack on transgender individuals or their families. We have compassion, and we're looking to help those individuals on both sides of this vote. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not saying specifically attack. I'm just saying in general, I think there's like 3 bills with transgender that I saw out there for this year, and it was a common theme last year, and it's going to continue to be a common theme. Is there anything to help people help transgender people rather than the bills that seem to be changing things to make it harder, if that makes sense?
I don't know that I can answer that question. I can only speak on my view. And I do want to separate my personal view from what I feel is important for the general public. But I'll tell you what weighed when I listened to the testimony, and I wasn't able to listen to any of the committee testimony. But on the House floor, and of course there's a lot of discussion in the Capitol as this particular issue we knew was going to be addressed. But you sort through all that, the one common thread that kept coming back to me I feel we need to do anything possible to protect the vulnerable children. And that does not, I'm not saying that the transgender child is more vulnerable or less vulnerable. I'm not a doctor, I don't know that. But I do recognize that can be a tough time of life for many of us. Talk to my parents, if they were living, they would probably say it was a tough time of your life, Lance. I don't really remember that a lot. I mean, it was just I went through that stage and I did a lot of stupid stuff, I suspect. Number 2, I've heard a lot of testimony from agencies, the Department of Social Services being one, the number of children that have been abandoned. And again, I don't want to pick on families, dysfunctional families or whatever. We've got a huge issue in our state with foster care, and those types of things. Huge issue. There's just more and more and more. And I think about those young people, I think need to be protected. Now, what did happen, as you well know, the bill was first introduced, I think he had to be 18 years of age, and it was ratcheted down to under 16 years of age. So, again, you're talking about children that are going through stuff. But My view is this, that we do so many things to protect what we feel are the vulnerable folks in our society. It could be the elderly, it could be the children, it could be the unborn, it could be a lot of, you can put your tag on a lot of that stuff. In this case, I felt that it was the right thing to do, and it did not. If that person, that transgender, I respect them. I can't walk in their shoes. I don't know what that's like, but I respect them. But when they are older and they would like to do those things to feel more comfortable with themselves, that's fine. That's fine. So.
Thank you. And as additional things come up like that, I just hope that South Dakota doesn't make national headlines for the wrong reasons. That's the thing that I hope doesn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, you
What's it look like
three.
from that side?
What?
What's it look like from that side?
I like it over here. So I'm going to follow up on the last person, Tona Rosem, a Water Under the Bridge representative. So there you go, but still actively thinking about all of it. But I see two issues with 1057. Number one is there doesn't seem to be consideration or discussion for those kids that aren't born with 46XX or 46XY chromosomes. Sometimes you have 45XX. Sometimes you have way too much testosterone that doesn't mitigate. So as legislators, we're saying we know better than the doctor and the parents for what those kids are going through. And I think the troublesome thing, and I'm seeing it in a fair amount of bills, as Republicans, we've always said the problem should be solved closest to home. So whether it's the county elections, the school board elections, whatever it's dealing with, parents know best. We talk about education, we talk about homeschooling. The parents know best, we should stay closest to that. But yet, we're legislating things that should be personal, I believe, at the personal level where people know best. And this one sort of leads to, well, if you got a transgender kid, then you might be a bad parent. Therefore, you might not make a good decision. And look at Sanford. 20 kids in the entire Sanford system, not just South Dakota, have ever been treated for gender dysphoria. So once again, and we're going to see these transgender bills as long as that particular representative continues to bring them. And we're going to be legislating for problems that probably don't exist. So that's more philosophical than anything, and you're welcome to comment. But I'd love to see us stick closer to the philosophy of closer to home for our kids is better, and for our local governments is better than trying to sit in the place that says, well, we know better. So
just to your point, just an updating kind of thing. That bill has now been assigned to Senate Health and Human Services. So that's chaired by a medical professional, and I'm guessing it will get that medical attention.
Out of curiosity, who's that medical professional?
Senator Soholt.
Great. Yeah, good. Thank you.
I have a commentary on that. Those genetic abnormalities are addressed in this bill, and they were excluded from this bill. So I want you to know that those X chromosome abnormalities were excluded from this bill.
Right, and I read that as part of the bill, but the other part of that is what the baby looks like at birth. And more common than we would like to admit, there are births where the genitalia is not developed enough to determine what that child is. So then you can go back to the chromosomes, and you might have normal chromosomes, but you still might, because the hormones don't always level out, you still may have too much testosterone to develop, and you may not know that until you reach puberty, and suddenly when you should be developing breasts, you're not. So, I mean, there's so much scientifically, physiologically in that the unintended consequences, I fear, and then going back to who should know better than the parent and the doctor. Certainly not we sit in legislative seats. So, thank you. Good work, though. Keep it up. Keep pressing forward.
Could I comment
Thank you.
on that? Please do. I just want to say one thing prior to just clarify a little bit. I'm seatmates with Dr. Deutsch that brought this bill, and I just want to clarify that his intentions are good. He is not a hater of transgender people, but the other two bills are coming from the Senate. So he doesn't start or carry all of these bills to the legislature. Two of them came from the Senate that we will see in the future in this session. So just a point of clarification.
Denny Kamick, I'm a retired cabinet secretary of the Department of Corrections, and we studied this issue because we deal with it every day in the prison system. And I have researched this, and I've talked to some very wise individuals. Whether or not it needs a law or not, I can't tell you that. You guys will figure that out. But I will say this, is that the brain is not fully developed until age 25. And that explains some of my youth as well. But that's the way it is. And I don't think it should have been lowered to 16. I think it should have stayed at 18 or should have been higher than that, to be honest with you, if you're going to pass a law. The greatest majority of individuals that believe that they would like to have something that once it's done, whether it's the shots or whether it's surgery or anything else, it can't be reversed. It is there. And the majority of youth that believe this and want something done ends up, they change their mind when they get older. And I think it is correct that it would be irresponsible in most cases of doctors to prescribe that medication or make a surgery type procedure when they know that that individual has a great chance of changing their mind later in life. And I think that in itself makes this a very important topic. Thank you.
Mr. Widman, you.
Paul Whitman, Mitchell. I'd like to direct this at Representative Cove. You're in appropriations, right? I don't know if you read a couple of weeks ago in the Sunday Argus Leader, they were commenting on ways, how much money that the state of South Dakota needs and ways that South Dakota could find. One of the ways that they came up with is that South Dakota is, I think, maybe one of two states as compared to Switzerland or an offshore company, where people can invest money in South Dakota without having to pay like estate taxes and so forth. Right now it sets at something over $300 and some billion. South Dakota gets 0.0006% of that. And that gives us about $1 million out of that 300 and some billion. In 2035, they're saying that will be closer to $700 billion. Why can't South Dakota get more than that 0.0006 and even go to 1%? If they went to 1%, that would take away a lot of our headaches as far as finances. Can you relate anything on that issue?
Paul, thank you for that question. I don't know if I'm on the same page as you, but we may be talking about the trust.
I think it's called a trust.
Yeah, right. And our trust laws in South Dakota were developed before I was in Pierre, and quite honestly, I don't understand that completely. But it is attractive for a lot of large trust companies to put their charter in South Dakota, and I assume that it's probably for those reasons that it's because of the tax, the lenience on tax. So if that's what we're talking about, I've heard that before, and yeah, we could maybe figure something out. I don't want to say it's not an appropriation problem because ultimately it is, but that's more of a taxation, do we change that? And then, I don't know, would it chase those companies out of the state rather than getting a small piece, we would get zero? Don't know that.
There's only
But-
two, I think, two states that,
Yeah.
there's another state, and I don't know who it is, besides South Dakota that allow this.
You know, quite honestly, you are farther along in that learning curve than I am. Okay, so I learned something. But I don't know the answer, but good suggestion.
But that's just an idea.
Yeah, I
The one
appreciate
thing
that.
I've heard about this whole trust thing is, yeah, we might get a very small portion, but all it takes for them to move out is a zip code change, and they're gone. And nothing-
Where would they go?
I don't know, and
Okay, yeah.
but I'm just saying that's how it's been portrayed to us, how tenuous the relationship could be.
On this issue, South Dakota has more money in trust funds in our state than any other state in the union. We just became number one, I believe, last year, perhaps the year before. But in addition to that taxation that we get from the trust companies, we get hundreds of jobs that come to South Dakota from highly skilled and highly trained people to manage these trust funds. So it's a great asset in job recruitment and in tax revenues from those that choose to move to our state.
Is there another question?
Bring some tough questions, please.
JP, do you have a question?
Anybody else? Sure.
Good afternoon. JP Skelly, KORN News Radio. Could you describe the relationship between the governor's office and the legislature this session as it compares to last year's session? What kind of changes have you seen?
Well, I meet with the governor's staff once a week. All the leadership does, and I can say it's different. It's probably, I don't want to use the word mellow, but it's more mellow. And last year it was really a lot of her way. This is what we're going to do. And this year it's, so what do you guys think we should do, type of thing. And so that's definitely the change I see going forward. Doesn't mean that we're still not disagreeing on some things and agreeing on others, like always, but that's the overall change in tone that I've seen.
From my view, I don't have direct contact with the governor unless I go to her office. In other words, she doesn't seek me out. But, and Senator Klum, he's in a leadership role, so, that's important, and, we're all proud of that position that he's, gotten to. From my view, and this is my interaction through people and then through the executive branch, that I looked at last year now as that was her first year, kind of like, I need to figure this out. First time governor, I'm in charge. I need to make sure everybody knows that, and I get that. Those of us that's walked a lot of years in this life, you always have that. You've got that. You've got to establish your boundaries, your turf, etc. That's been done. This year, as Senator Plum said, the perception is that she's more open to the legislators' ideas. So, and I think that that's good. But I do want to mention one thing, that Governor Dugard did a wonderful job, and some people have described him as being cheap. He's very, very. then he came in, is shaking his head like that, and he was maybe a penny pincher of sorts. The thing that I've noticed about Governor Noem, which I appreciate, now we still struggle with trying to come up with enough money to take care of the needs of the state, and I think we'll always will be. Always will have that problem. But she is looking down the road. She's looking at the economic development piece, I think, in a much clearer, long-range plan. And folks, that costs money. You invest money now, you may not show a real return maybe for 10 years or 5 years. That's the thing that I see about Governor Noem. Now, that part right there, I think even for the executive branch, the people, the holdovers, if you want to call people that have been there, that's a change. That takes time for that philosophy to get some traction and get root. I happen to believe in that. There's a balance there. We've got to take care of the current needs. We've got to take care of the really important things. But yet on the same token, we need to be thinking down the road and say, what is important for the state of South Dakota long term? So I think the relationship, JP, currently at this stage, after week 3, is on a scale of 1 to 10, I think we're at an 8. Last year we may have been at a 2 or 3.
I think the governor's made a concerted effort to work together with us and to communicate with us more effectively. I think in her first year, she was so busy getting her cabinet and all her employees organized with dealing with Washington, D.C., trying to put a pipeline bill together that was effective. You may agree or disagree on what the final product was, but she was so busy in her first term that she didn't have the time. It seems that she has more time to build relationships. The CVB, the Convention Visitors Bureau, was in here for the tourism gathering. Governor Noem's address just praised South Dakota tourism for the surprise that in this year with all of our floods and natural disasters that we have growth in not only the number of visitors, but the income to the state of South Dakota. So her report and her speech to the chambers and the different convention visitors bureaus was nothing but positive, and I think she's working to build relationships with all of South Dakota because she isn't as involved as she was last year in that initial year of trying to set everything up.
Thank you. We have time for one more question.
This is Phil Spanos, with her in Mitchell. On a lighter note, even though I don't have a dog in the fight, Sunday is the big game. 49ers or Chiefs? Where do you guys stand?
I'm for the Chiefs.
I happen to be a Bears fan.
I don't have a dog in the fight, but I hope it's a great game.
Okay, I guess we have time for one more question if anybody has one.
Just a quick observation. Every year in the legislature, counties come in and we're looking for sales tax, we're looking for some sort of vehicle. There are a couple of them that are going through the process, and I hope somebody gives some credence to that. Those are local option pieces. Those are not my favorite pieces. I would rather we have a sales tax. We're the only one of the big 3 that has nothing, which systemically, that's what I want to talk about. Systemically, when you do that, you invite participation of counties especially every single time because they're searching for some dollars. And again, I said it before, state has 4, cities have 2, we have 0. And I say that especially now, that repercussion, I think we're feeling more because of the disaster situations. As you know, we've got bridges out yet, and we replaced 96 culverts last year and continue with that. But the problem we run into is the cost of inflation, and we get our CPI index, but that cost of inflation is so much higher for bridge repair, that type of thing. As we've been looking at 2 to 3%, many of those years we're seeing 7 to 10% increase. And the numbers of firms that are going to be doing bridge work are going to be very, very limited. Cost is going to skyrocket. So we've got some major deficiencies there, and the reason I say that is this is systemic over many years that we have not kept up. I'm fortunate to be in Davidson County where I think a lot of good things are happening and we've been able to keep up a lot. I'm thinking of my friends in other counties There's some counties, I don't know if they're going to open. I don't know how they can afford to. So I just want to say systemically that the legislature should have another conveyance of that as a long-term need that is going to become very, very difficult. So I'm glad to be here.
Can I ask John a question?
Certainly.
Just a question, more bring me up to speed as it relates to the disaster declaration.
Yes.
That I believe Davidson County
Yep.
is a part of that.
Yes.
Is that piece of it, along with the state's short-term funding and then being able to pay that off over, what, 5, 7, 10 years?
Yeah, there's
And
different
that
increments apparently.
is not that that's a solution to what you've just stated, but is that helping?
It's the Band-Aid. You still have to come up with that resource. And if the counties had enough dollars to do it on the front end, you could build that into your budget figures. You could put it long-term spending vision plan. When we did our master plan for our 20-year master plan for the county, we came up with a shortfall of $12,600 per day for 20 years, just to maintain what we have, nothing new. So, truly, we're in better shape than many counties. So when you start adding the numbers, they're very astronomical. And I just think, again, systemic looks at where our budgets are and where those things are going to land, it's going to come on our lap sometime pretty soon. So thank you for your participation in doing so.
I believe we had one more question if you don't have any comments for John. Did you have a question, sir?
My name's Frank Baker. On infrastructure, I was wondering if you've been thinking about it in the legislature at any time. The raising the gas tax, I think it should be raised about 10 or 15 cents, and about 1/3 of that to go to the county. The gas is down now. If you're going to ever raise gas taxes, now would be the
Highways, but I don't know the current, I'm trying to find it here. I only have 118 to sit through here. But it has, a new tax has not been talked about. The governor's made it very clear she's not in favor of new taxes, and we just passed Senate Bill 1 with Senator Valley not very long ago. And so that was a Herculean effort then, and the appetite for tax increases is never there.
I know the governor's not for it,
So,
but that was my...
I think there is discussions about redirecting some of that funding, which will ultimately create more discussions. That's what we do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're ready for closing comments. Representative Muskimmons, would you like to begin?
I would. In closing, I'd like to say what a privilege it is to learn about all the great activities and all the great people, things that I didn't know as a practicing dentist. And one that I'd like to highlight is our South Dakota National Guard. They're the finest National Guard unit in America. There were 33 national competitions last year for Guard units. South Dakota won 31 of them. We invest $8 million, which was about $3 million more than last year because of the Readiness Center in Rapid City. The state of South Dakota got $196 million in return from federal government. So the return for our investment is phenomenal. I have concerns with the relationship between our rural electrics and our municipal electrics, and that those negotiations have been very contentious. I'm hopeful that they'll settle their issues at the table and not have the legislature decide how those negotiations and those transitions take place. I think their issues will be better served in their hands. And whether we're talking about the James River Water District and with the Department of Natural Resources, or whether we're talking about dredging Lake Mitchell or whether we're talking about housing developments. I just want to share what a privilege it is to be on the inside and to have the opportunity to learn as much as we do in Pierre.
Thank you for allowing me to serve. It's been a learning experience, and I'm still learning, and hopefully never quit learning. One thing I'd just like to close with is that a common thing that we hear all the time in Pierre is workforce issues, and a lot of that has to do with things out of our control. Just don't have enough people. The other thing, though, is what we're able to pay them. And I would also mention that there's strong evidence that the legislature does want to figure out a way to increase in 3 areas if we can find the money. Not just because Dr. Graves is sitting toward the front, but education is in that. And not because Pam's still here?
She had to leave.
Well, Pam was staring me down, so. Community service providers, that piece of it. And the other area that is really an issue, and that's government employees. And folks, that does not just include people in Pierre. I mean, that includes people in taking care of our prison system, the Department of Transportation, people that keep our roads open and do all of that stuff. Tough time. We're behind. We're really behind the 8 ball on that. But we're taking it serious, and I think I speak for Senator Clement and Representative Miskimmons that we as the legislature say we need to figure this out. We don't know where it's going to come from, but I will say this, that if revenue projections come in like we think they will, and keep in mind, on February 6th, I believe it is, we will have January numbers, so we're another month into fiscal year 20. That'll give us the ability to project what fiscal year 20 will end. And then we also, at the same time, are looking into fiscal year 21. What might that look like? That process is, those people that figured that out, they're real smart because they come in less than 1% and 15 months in advance, try to figure out everything. So with that being said, we believe that the revenues will be up. Okay, and keep in mind, fiscal year 20, if it's up, there's leftover money. That's called one-time money. We will figure out a way to where that needs to go. And some of those priorities, we're talking about a lot of different things. And then in fiscal year 21, if the revenue numbers come up and we control the costs here, we'll have more opportunity to do those things that we feel are really important. And that's workforce, folks. I mean, it's an issue. Nothing against the roads. Maybe some one-time money might be another Band-Aid. Put enough Band-Aids on there, and pretty soon you maybe don't bleed to death. Don't know. But again, thank you for allowing me to serve. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. One thing I was brought to my attention this week, it was kind of interesting. You know, we talk a lot about, well, we have this huge reserve fund that gives us a AAA bond rating. What does that really mean for our local districts? And we were handed a document this week, and just for our District 20, so it will save the school district in Western Springs $40,000 in interest payments by having a AAA bond rating. It will save the Mitchell School District $23,094 in interest payments. And it will save Ethan $45,000 just by having a AAA bond rating. So when you hear people talk, well, we have all this reserve, we should just spend some of it. First of all, those would be one-time dollars. And by putting those towards things like education or taking care of people would put us farther behind the next year because they're not ongoing. And it would cause those interest rates to rise, and then you'd have those payments that we currently would be saving. The school district would have to come up with those things as well. All total for the whole state, all the school districts, Having a AAA bond rating saves us about $13.3 million. So, in reduced interest payments. So that, when people talk about our reserve fund being so high, why don't we use it? $13.3 million is why we don't use it. But what that means is ongoing costs. So, again, Representative Coase has a really good handle on this. We all hear updates every day, but it's a process, and it will be slowly fleshed out in the whole session. And when we get to done, we'll have a balanced budget, and that's the constitutional obligation we have. So, and thank you all for being here, but I don't have anything else.
Thank you, the three of you, for serving District 20. Thank all of you for attending today. Our next Cracker Barrel will be held Friday, March 6th, same location, same time. Hey, Phil.
Did Commissioner Weedle tell you that when my son and I were shopping at Sam's on Sunday,